So, the BookTube girlies are doing this tag called Where My Lore Started, and it's all about figuring out where their love for reading came from by looking at all of the books that they used to read as children and, basically seeing what were the books that made them the readers that they are today. Well, I decided that I would do the same thing or a similar thing, but trying to figure out what were the books that made me the writer that I am today. You'll be surprised at the revelations that I found when I did this exercise. Welcome back, Literarians. I'm Literary Lori, and I hope your literary life is poppin'. I hope you're reading, writing, hanging out at bookstores the way you want to so that your literary life is exactly how you want it. So, for today's video, we are going to go down my literary memory lane to look at the books that made me the writer that I am today. For those of you who are writers, this is a great exercise really to do that can help you do a couple of things. One, it can help you reconnect with your why for becoming a writer in the first place. And two, it can really help you if you're stuck trying to figure out what your writing voice is, or if you're stuck trying to figure out what you want to write about, what genre you want to write in. If you're just kind of feeling a little bit like your writing is not flowing, this exercise can actually be a godsend in, again, reinvigorating your writing passions. So let's go through my reading history. And also you're going to find out what revelation occurred to me when I finished doing this exercise. All right, let's go. So I'm going to be going through kind of a chronological Lori's book obsessions, and we're going to see kind of patterns, and we're going to see how they add up at the end to the writer I am today. All right. So starting with childhood, these were the books that I was obsessed with. I had The Boxcar Children, which was a series of books about four little white children who were orphans who lived in a boxcar in the forest, and they had to fend for themselves. There were tons of them in the series. I did stop reading the series when they found their rich grandfather and he took their boxcar out of the forest and put it in his backyard. I don't know, the fun was gone for me once they, were taken care of and living comfortably. Another book that I loved was the Little House on the Prairie books by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I love a plucky heroine. I lived in Wisconsin. She lived in Wisconsin. So I found, I thought we were very connected in that. Another obsession I had as a child reader was Encyclopedia Brown. Yeah, I loved a detective story. I was in like second grade reading those Encyclopedia Brown books, and I really thought I was going to be a detective. I was nosy. I like to hang around adults. Being Encyclopedia Brown, we had that connection going. So those were my obsessions as a child. Orphans, detectives, and plucky heroines. Now, the kind of transition from childhood reading to, let's say, kind of middle school or middle grade reading. Of course, we didn't have those terms, middle grade readers, at the time, but still, my kind of bridge was Anne of Green Gables. Anne of Green Gables, Anne Shirley, she was my girl. She was the girl who I really identified with, even though I was black, she's white, but she was a redheaded, freckle-faced orphan, and she stood out, and she wasn't like everybody else. She was really creative, and she was always looking for kindred spirits, and I thought she and I would be kindred spirits. Now, those of you who read Anne of Green Gables, but then went on and read the whole series, knew that there was also a love interest that eventually came, Gilbert, right? So Anne Shirley, Anne of Green Gables was my gateway drug, if you will, to my next obsession, which was middle school through high school, and that was romance novels. Yes, I admit it. I went deep down a huge rabbit hole, starting with Harlequin romances. I think I had to be in 6th or 7th grade only when I discovered that my aunt had a subscription to Harlequin romance novels, and I think they just came in the mail, and I found her stash under her bed and in her attic, and every time we had a family gathering, me and my cousin would go up and like fill our pockets, fill our bags, fill our purses with her Harlequin romance novels. Now, these were like those thin little, maybe they were 120 pages, could not get enough. I say I made my way through my dateless high school, middle school years because I was happily filling my need for romance by reading these Harlequin romance novels. Now, by the time I got to high school, I had graduated. I was like, I need something deeper, more drama than these little Harlequin romance novels, but I still wanted the romance. And that's when I discovered those big, thick bodice rippers that you would find, at the grocery store or on a certain shelf at the library. So I dabbled with Danielle Steele. I read Love Story by Eric Siegel, but it wasn't until I discovered this author. Her name was Kathleen E. Woodwis. I still remember that. Like, I could still see the covers of all her books. She wrote historical romance novels, and they were, chunky, big books, and there was always a plucky heroine. It was always set in some very significant historical era, and I loved them. I would carry these big fat books around with me. I'm amazed I passed high school, because this is what I was doing in my free time, reading these books, and I was reading them obsessively. I still remember, may we have a moment of silence. I still remember when I read Kathleen E. Woodwis's last book, and I was depressed, because I was like, how can I live knowing that there's not a next one to read? And by the time I discovered her, I think she was pretty old at the time. She wasn't writing any more books. So I really spent like significant time in mourning, like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do next? After getting through her whole catalog, nothing felt the same, but I still would look for, another dopamine hit of historical fiction, historical romance, excuse me, and found those. Now, when I was 17, I went to Morocco. I was an exchange student. If you want to hear more about that, read my memoir, Kinky Gazpacho. But the point is, when I was in Morocco, I had a lot of free time to read, and I didn't have a lot of books with me, so I would go to the American Library in the cultural center there, and would just look around the shelves and see what books were available. Now, I discovered their book by John Irving, and I literally picked it off the shelf because it was the biggest book there. And I just wanted something long that would take me a long time to read. And I can't remember if it was A Prayer for Owen Meany or Cider House Rules. But again, plucky hero, they were boys, but they were orphans. Big, thick, dramatic stories. When I came back from Morocco, I was obsessed with John Irving, and I was reading all of his books, which again, they were people stories, and they were dramatic, and they were big and long and sweeping. And that became the next obsession, was everything by John Irving, who again wrote these big, dramatic, sweeping stories, all of them that took place in the United States. Now, if you notice a theme here, the theme being like, what was the connecting force between all of these random books? All of the authors were white. All of these authors were white. Now, did I ever read a book by a Black author in this time, from birth to graduating high school? I know I did read a few, but the books that I was obsessed with, the books that I was reading all the time, white authors. It wasn't until I graduated college and moved to Brooklyn that I actually discovered the plethora, the diversity of Black authors. I immediately got a library card to the Brooklyn Public Library. And even though Black author is not a genre, I treated it like it was. Every single weekend, I went to the library and I would just look on the shelves, look at the back covers, read the description of the book, make sure the author was Black from the picture, and be like, okay, I'll take this one. I kid you not. It was like I was trying to make up for lost time. 3 years without fail, every single weekend, and I'm just reading Black authors, memoir, fiction, nonfiction, Black author, I'm reading it. Again, not a genre, but I treated it like it was. I went to Jamaica to the Calabash Literary Festival in 2010 and did a little side tour into Jamaican authors, got totally obsessed, read every Jamaican author I could get my hands on for over a year after that festival. But that actually even opened my mind up even further to more diverse authors of color. And because I learned so much about Jamaican culture and history just by reading the novels, that became something that I wanted to do with other cultures. And so I really started widening my scope of looking for diverse authors to enjoy the story, but also learn about the culture as well. So by the time I hit my early 30s, I had really found the authors that I loved, authors like Bernice McFadden, Zadie Smith, Terry McMillan, Andrea Levy, Veronica Chambers, Danzy Senna, Elizabeth Nunez, so many more, but really it was a multicultural hodgepodge of authors who were writing dramatic stories with some romance. I really got into Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Isabel Allende, a little magic to go in there too. And so that's where I am today still, is I still love BIPOC authors who write dramatic stories. I love romance. I don't read romance novels. Like, I never go to the romance section of the library or the bookstore, but I love a story where there's romance in it. I just need more around the romance, right? So that's who I am as a reader, right? And you can see where it comes from. It makes perfect sense. But the question is now, how does this impact who I am as a writer, right? Now, interestingly, I have written a lot of nonfiction, memoir, cultural history, and you could say that all of those things, the dramatic history, the dramatic stories, the global, multicultural, all of that is in my nonfiction. Now, my fiction, this is where I'm discovering who I want to be as a writer. And by doing this exercise, I realized that the things that I like to read are also the things that I want to write. And I came away with two big aha realizations after doing this exercise. One, the feeling that I had when I was obsessed with Kathleen E. Wood as an author, as a storyteller. That's the feeling that I want to give to my future readers. I want them to be like, I will stand in line in the rain for the next Lori Tharp's book. I want them to carry it around in their purse, read it late at night, give it to their friends. I want to have that sense that I felt when I was reading these big dramatic stories. I want to give that to my readers. So that was the first thing, was by remembering what it was that made me fall in love with these different books and be obsessed with certain authors, certain genres. It reminded me of my why for being a writer. I wanted to do the same thing for other people. I wanted to be the person who created that story that gave that feeling that, oh my goodness, what am I going to do without this book? Oh my God, I love this book so much. I'm willing to fail high school to read this book. I don't want any children to fail high school, no. But you know what I'm saying? Like, that is a feeling that I was like, yes, those feelings that I had, I want to give them to someone else. The second thing is that I realized that the types of books that gave me the most pleasure, that I loved the most, were not the books that I thought I was supposed to write. Somehow I got it in my head that I had to write literary fiction, quiet novels that, I don't know, were going to make it to the New York Times bestseller list and win the Pulitzer Prize. When I'm like, none of the books that I was really obsessed with and that I really loved were those types of books. But it freed me up to say, if this is the feeling that I want to give people, if this is what I want people to feel like, the same way I felt reading certain books, why am I aiming at a different genre, a different type of storytelling, when the things that moved me were more what we would call today book club fiction? So that freed me up, and to say, you can write book club fiction, because what you want to do is give people the experience that you had reading these types of books. So for me, that was a real big revelation. It freed me up to look at the authors that made me the happiest reader, right? So my first novel was Substitute Me, and it's dramatic. It has a Black main character. There's romance, but I feel like I was holding back a little bit. The next two novels I've written, both since moving to Spain, they are dramatic. They have a little dusting of magic. They have romance. And my thought was, oh, pull back the romance. Don't make everything a romance. But I'm like, but I love romance. As you can see, I love romance. It's part of my reader DNA. So why am I holding it back? Why not put it front and center in the story? That is one thing that I really gained from this exercise, is like, romance is part of my DNA. Book club fiction is part of my DNA. Big juicy drama and magic are part of my DNA. So I'm allowed to put it in the stories that I write. And that way I'm going to be in love with my own books. I will be obsessed with my own books. And then I hope that I can find readers who are also will be obsessed with the novels that I put out. And they'll have that same feeling that I had when I was reading the books that, I was the most obsessed with. So if you're a writer, I highly recommend you do this exercise. Go back to the books you were obsessed with. How did they make you feel? What were the books that you were choosing and why? What were the eras you went through? And then see what it brings you. What information does it tell you about what you should be writing, what you loved, and what you want to give to your future readers? Tell me how it goes if you do it. Let me know what books you were obsessed with. And I will see you all in the next video. Happy reading, happy writing.